Hey everyone, this is HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Stories forged by humans, not machines. Because HFY is our story. I'm Orion Thane. Subscribe and witness what comes next. The calibration strip on the edge of the scanner bed aligned itself to the printed guide, paused, then shifted half a millimeter past it. Mara Vin watched the strip without moving her hand from the page. The machine corrected for most things. Dust, curling paper, heat from a nearby lamp. It did not overshoot. Not here, not in Annex Theta, where every surface had been measured, cataloged, and checked often enough that people no longer noticed the checking. The strip settled where it should have been, and the scanner light went from amber to white. Mara turned the page anyway. The paper was older than the station, older than the moon below it, older by 2 governments and 1 collapse. It had a stitched spine and margins marked in 3 kinds of ink. It came from a sealed diplomatic transfer bag opened 6 hours earlier under observation by 2 clerks, 1 legal officer, and a camera that had no blind corner unless someone built one. She flattened the page with 2 fingers and waited for the next scan. Across the room, Ilian Sork adjusted a chair that was already straight. He did it with his foot, not looking down. 1 short push. 2 degrees left, enough to square it with the desk seam. Then he checked the wall display, checked the intake ledger, and clipped a fresh data seal to the corner of a gray folder. He wore station black with the sleeves rolled once, exact and even. He had been in the annex for 3 weeks and had not yet leaned on a desk, sat crooked in a chair, or spoken a sentence he could have cut in half. Mara slid the next page onto the scanner bed. "Did you see that?" she asked. Ilian did not ask what she meant. He crossed the room, looked at the strip, looked at the machine log still open on the side display, then bent slightly to inspect the paper guide. "No debris," he said. "Not what I asked." He read the last 6 entries. Minor tracking correction. It overshot. It returned. Mara looked at him. He kept his eyes on the log. The scanner hummed once, low in the casing. White light crossed the page in a clean bar. The strip held steady this time. In the glass partition behind them, their reflections stood side by side with a row of document drawers between their shoulders, giving each of them an extra column of shadow. Ilian touched the corner of the scanner bed, then withdrew his hand. Page thickness changed. It didn't. He turned 1 page back, then forward, measuring nothing visible. Binding pressure shifts at the center. "You're making the machine innocent before it's accused." "I'm making it boring." Mara let that pass. The annex preferred boring. Boring kept treaties intact and ships from turning around mid-route. Boring was why the station had survived 3 administrations without anyone sealing it or stripping it for parts. Records mattered more than most people admitted in public. Not because records were sacred, because memory moved when pressure touched it, and paper, if kept dry and cold, resisted better than people did. She scanned the next page, then the next. The document had arrived under a Title II plane to be important. Transit procedural notes, outer mediation corridor, cycle 18. Most such transfers ended in indexing and sleep. But the legal officer had flagged this one because the appendix referenced an early pre-charter negotiation, and anything pre-charter had to be reviewed by a licensed archivist before it entered the station's permanent lattice. Mara was the licensed archivist. Ilian was the compliance officer assigned after someone in Central Records decided that old paper and quiet rooms still needed oversight. He had not said much when he arrived. He had walked the annex once, stopped at every sealed case, noted that drawer 14A closed half a second slower than the rest, and submitted a maintenance request before learning anyone's name. Mara had disliked him on sight, which had saved time. Now he returned to his desk and opened the intake record. The room resumed its usual order. Scanner light. Soft fan movement in the upper vents. The faint click of Ilian's stylus against the screen when he confirmed each metadata field. Somewhere beyond the inner hatch, a cart rolled over the corridor seam and passed. Mara reached the midpoint of the document just before station dusk simulation, when the overhead panels dimmed by 8% and the glass picked up more shadow than detail. She preferred that hour. The annex looked honest then. On page 72, the paper changed. Not in size, not in stock, Not enough for anyone who handled documents casually. But the drag under her fingertips shifted. Less tooth, slightly tighter finish. The right margin was trimmed cleaner than the rest of the section. The ink, viewed at an angle, held light half a breath longer. Mara stopped with her hand on the lower corner. Ilian looked up at the silence rather than the motion. What? She did not answer at once. She lifted the page, checked the thread binding, set it down again. Page 71 and page 72 had the same numbering hand. Same ink family. Same stamp at the bottom. The transition between them was seamless enough to satisfy an audit done from a desk. But someone had either inserted a sheet at some point in the document's life or replaced one so carefully the rest of the bundle had learned to accept it. Mara turned to page 73. The texture remained the same. How old is the transfer seal? She asked. Original bag? Ilian checked the manifest. 32 hours since chain capture. What? She ran her thumb across the lower margin of page 72. This section isn't uniform. Ilian came over again. This time he took the page edge only when she let go of it. He felt the surface once, expression unchanged, then held it under the desk light. Replacement? He said. Maybe. Before transfer. Not recently. He set it down, lined it exactly with the scanner guide, and looked at the page number. No break in sequence. Whoever altered it knew how to count. He said nothing. That was one of his habits Mara had come to distrust. Some people answered too quickly because they wanted to own the room. Ilian did the opposite. He let silence stay where it landed. It made careless people step into it. Mara, who was not careless, still felt the pull. She angled the page toward the light. There were 2 blocks of text and a foot line referencing corridor dispatch privileges during mediation transit. It was procedural language, dry enough to put a court clerk into a reflective mood. But halfway down the second block, a phrase sat cleaner than the surrounding text, as though the sentence had been built around it later. Final reading sequence remains at the discretion of receiving authority. Ordinary on its face. Legal language liked words like discretion. They spread responsibility until no one could prove where a decision had first taken shape. Mara read the paragraph above it. Then below, pull the page image from the transfer pre-scan, she said. Ilian moved to the wall terminal. The annex stored everything twice. Once as received, raw and unattributed. Once as processed, corrected for warping, angle, and stain bleed. He accessed the intake packet, brought up the courier scan, then the custom scan from 3 stations earlier. Mara came to stand beside him. Page 72 looked the same in both. That means the replacement is older than transit, he said. Yes. Could be original to the bundle. No. He glanced at her. She pointed to the lower stamp. Station clerk pressed that with a rigid die. Every page from 1 to 71 takes the strike the same way. This one absorbed a fraction more ink at the outer edge. Different finish. Different storage, maybe. Different humidity exposure at some point. Years ago, could be. He enlarged the text block. The letters pixelated, then sharpened under the enhancement pass. Same line spacing. Same register. Same official formatting marks. Whoever had done the work had not been improvising. Ilian said, Does the sentence matter? Mara read it again. Not the sentence itself. Not yet. What mattered was its location. It sat in a section defining review order for mediated transfers. Customs first, registry second, arbitration last. Routine, except this copy suggested that the receiving authority could alter the reading sequence. That would allow a document to be lawfully opened from its final section before the rest was certified. She leaned closer to the screen. The title in the header remained banal. Procedural notes. Transit corridor. Cycle 18. Find me where this appendix is cited, she said. Ilian was already searching. 3 references appeared. One in a maintenance bulletin decades later. One in a training abstract. One in a sealed index marker associated with the Kaledvar arbitration shelf. Restricted pending treaty sunset. Mara looked at the restricted marker. Ilian looked at it too, then minimized the result without opening it. She turned to him. Why did you close that? Because you saw it. And And because opening a sunset restriction without cause creates cause. Mara almost smiled but didn't. He was right in the most irritating way available. She went back to the scanner table and lifted the next page. Same altered stock. Same clean trim. The paragraph layout had the same mild wrongness. Not visible unless you had spent 16 years handling records built by committees and copied by tired clerks. This was not a forged document. It was something worse and quieter. A corrected document. The kind built by people who believed the truth could survive arrangement. The overhead lights dimmed another degree. Station dusk moved deeper into the room. The scanner bed reflected her fingertips and the white border of the page. How many pages in this section? Ilian asked. She checked the thread tension carefully this time. 7. All replacements? Looks like it. He came over with the intake ledger in hand and stood beside her, not crowding. Then the question isn't whether someone altered it. No, it's when and why these 7. He looked at page 78. Could be harmless. She gave him a look. He adjusted the ledger seal with his thumbnail. Not harmless. Administrative. Administrative is how harm gets to wear a badge. He let that sit for a moment. Then noted, the word was dry enough that she might have heard mockery in someone else. With him it sounded like filing. Mara rescanned page 72 at higher depth, then 73. The scanner accepted the pages, wrote perfect copies into storage, and did not again misalign the calibration strip. That bothered her more than if it had failed twice. One mistake could be mechanical. One mistake followed by flawless behavior was often attention. She checked the machine diagnostics. Clean. Checked local network timing. Clean. Checked environmental fluctuations. Stable within tolerances. The annex kept its own clocks, its own power smoothing, and a limited independent archive net separated from the station's public lattice by 3 permissions and 1 physical relay lock. Changes here either came through authorized hands or from inside. Inside meant a short list. Mara sat at her desk and pulled a fresh sheet of note paper from the drawer. Real paper, not station pulp. Cream stock, narrow ruled lines. She wrote the page numbers by hand, 72 to 78. Then below them, 3 words. Read order clause. Ilian noticed the paper but did not comment. He returned to his desk, requested access to historical handling records, and waited while the system considered his credentials. The wait stretched. That, more than the request itself, shifted something in the room. Archive systems on Theta were old, but they were not slow when addressed properly. Delay meant either a queue, a route issue, or a human hold somewhere upstream. There should have been no queue for sealed handling metadata at station dusk. Most departments were already into handover cycle. How long? Mara asked. He checked the timer at the corner of the screen. 23 seconds. Too long. Mara stood. Ilian did not repeat the request. He opened the path trace instead. 1 route light blinked, stabilized, then dropped out and returned on a secondary path. He tapped the relay map open. The request had gone from Annex Theta to Records Core, then been kicked sideways through administrative review before returning a permissions challenge. Administrative review had no role in historical page handling. Neither of them spoke. The room gave them its soft vent noise and the distant metal tick of the thermal lines settling behind the wall. Ilian set the ledger down with unusual care. That shouldn't happen. No. Did you notify anyone about the altered pages? Only you. He nodded once. Then he reached to the side of his terminal and closed the privacy slat over the external status light. It darkened the small green strip visible from the corridor window. A tiny action. Routine if anyone asked. Reduce glare during review. Mara folded her note paper once and placed it under the corner of the scanner base. On the wall terminal, the permissions challenge cleared without explanation. A document list opened. Handling history for the bundle appeared in chronological order, clean and complete until 41 years earlier. Then there was a gap. Not a missing line. Not corruption. A formal omission. 3 entries replaced by a neutral marker. Record sequence adjusted under receiving authority review. The exact phrase from page 72. Mara looked at the screen and then at the altered section on the table. The 7 pages lay flat under the softened light, their margins almost identical to the rest, their paper just wrong enough to keep an honest person awake. Ilian read the marker twice, then opened the authority signature attached to it. The field was blank. He did not curse. He did not reach for the console harder. He only slid the chair back 2 centimeters, enough to clear his knees, and sat straighter than before. Mara returned to the scanner. She turned carefully through the altered pages until she reached the last of the 7. At the bottom, beneath the final paragraph and above the clerk stamp, there was a line of text lighter than the rest. Not erased, not hidden, simply placed where a tired reader might skip as they moved toward the next section. She lowered her head slightly and read it once. Then again, her hand remained on the page. Across the room, Ilian watched her without speaking. Mara did not look up when she said, "Lock the annex." He was already moving. The inner hatch sealed with a soft pressure thump. Then the outer one followed a second later. Ilian checked the locks on the wall panel, not because the system required it twice, but because he checked most things twice when the first answer arrived too easily. The annex status changed from open review to restricted handling. Corridor visibility remained active, but access now required local approval from inside the room. Mara stayed where she was, one hand still resting on the lower edge of the page. The line was short, not more than a sentence. It sat below the body text in lighter ink, pressed so evenly into the paper that it looked less like an addition than a thought someone had trained themselves not to notice. Do not read the last line first. It should have been absurd. Instructions like that belong to unstable field manuals, training puzzles, private jokes between clerks trying to survive routine. Not inside an official transit appendix. Not in a section already replaced. Not beneath a procedural clause that had been used to erase handling records. She touched the margin with one finger, then lifted the page toward the desk light. Ilian came back from the hatch controls. "What is it?" She didn't answer at once. She wanted the words to remain where they were for a moment longer, unshared, as if naming them too soon would flatten them into something manageable. Then she handed him the page. He read the sentence once. His face did not change. He turned the page slightly to catch the light, checked the lower margin, then the paper edge, then the back. "A note," he said. "No." He looked at her. "Notes belong to people who expect discovery," Mara said. "This is placed to survive it." He set the page down with more care than before. "Instruction, then?" "Maybe." He read it again. "What happens if someone does?" Mara glanced at the remaining altered pages. "That depends on what the last line is." The annex was quiet enough that the scanner's idle current could be heard in the casing. A very thin hum, almost masked by the air vents. Mara became aware of her own hand on the desk and moved it away. The whole document had felt procedural until page 72. Dry language, transit order, review authority. Nothing in it suggested encoded correspondence or trap phrasing. It looked like the kind of record no one would read unless forced by dispute, which made it a good place to conceal instruction if concealment depended on boredom rather than secrecy. Ilian returned to the wall terminal and split the display into 2 panes. The handling gap remained on the left. On the right, he opened the scan images of pages 72 through 78. "No network exports," he said. "Already assumed. Local copies only." Mara nodded. Air gapped the scanner buffer. He did it without comment. Another small, exact movement. He isolated the scanner memory from the archive lattice, forcing all fresh captures into local storage pending manual release. Then he disabled background indexing. The annex shifted into an older mode of work, one Mara knew well and most stations had stopped teaching. When systems became uncertain, you reduced them until paper outranked signal. She preferred that. Mara sat, drew the cream note sheet back out from under the scanner base, and wrote the sentence at the top in a narrow hand. "Do not read the last line first." Under it she wrote, "Placement deliberate. Lower margin, lighter ink. Same hand family? Check. Instruction or warning." Ilian watched the note for half a second. "You think the line itself matters more than the text above it. I think someone wanted the order of reading controlled. That still could be administrative." She looked at him over the paper. He gave a very slight tilt of the head, acknowledging the weakness of the thought before she had to reject it aloud. Unlikely, he said. Mara turned back to page 78, the last of the replacement set. The body text concerned final certification, routing, after corridor mediation. Standard enough language. Signatures, transfer seals, registry timing. She skimmed the paragraph shapes rather than the meaning at first, looking for compression, looking for one sentence that sat a fraction cleaner than the rest. There were two possibilities near the bottom. Read it normally, Ilian said. Normal is what made it survive 41 years. And doing the opposite may be what it expects. She let the point rest in the air between them. This was the difference between them, or one of them. Mara trusted patterns that grew from handling, from long contact with things meant to last. Ilian trusted procedures that reduced choice by naming it. Neither was careful in the same direction, which was perhaps why the room had not yet turned foolish. She brought page 78 closer, but did not read the final line. Instead, she started at the top and took in the paragraph one sentence at a time. Transit certification, receiving authority, sequence preservation, supplemental review. Nothing on its face. Yet each sentence now felt like floor panels over a shaft. Even the plain ones suggested design, simply because they had survived beside concealment. At the desk opposite her, Ilian opened a character comparison utility on the local terminal. He fed in 3 samples: the main body text, the read order clause from page 72, and the lower margin instruction from page 78. The program mapped stroke angles, ink spread, pressure variance. Old tools, reliable enough when one was patient. Lower line isn't added later, he said after a moment. Mara looked up. Same instrument family. Similar pressure signature. Written during composition or within a very narrow window after. Same scribe? Maybe not. Same training? More likely. She leaned back slightly in her chair. That narrowed the field in the wrong direction. This was not sabotage applied to a stable record years later by a clever opportunist. It had been built close to the source by someone with official habits and access to official materials. Not forged from outside, adjusted from within. The station lights dimmed 1 more degree. In the reflection of the glass partition, Mara could see Ilian's desk lamp, the top edge of the scanner, and the pale rectangle of page 78 under her hand. The room looked composed from the outside. 2 officers at work. A review under restricted handling. Nothing worth a second glance. That, too, was useful. Pull the treaty sunset file, she said. Ilian did not move immediately. Restricted marker? Yes. We don't have cause. Mara looked at the page again. We have altered transit language, erased handling history, a missing authority signature, and an instruction governing reading order inside the altered section. That's enough for internal cause, he said. It should be. Should. He said the word without bitterness, but the room took it and held it. Mara knew how cause moved in the archive system. Officially, it rose from evidence. In practice, it often moved from rank, fear, and how inconvenient the evidence might become if admitted at full size. Annex Theta was respected when it was useful and bypassed when it was not. That was the nature of records work everywhere. Governments liked memory in principle. In detail, it made them restless. Ilian keyed the request in any way. This time the system responded too quickly. Access granted. No challenge. No routing delay. They both noticed. The sunset file opened to a metadata shell with most fields intact. Arbitration shelf, treaty deferral class. Release condition expired 17 years earlier. The actual contents, however, were gone. Not corrupted, not archived elsewhere. Replaced by a clean statement of lawful transfer under receiving authority discretion. The same phrase again. Mara stood and crossed the room. She braced one hand lightly on the back of Ilian's chair and read the empty metadata twice. Not because she needed to, but because the absence had been made with care. Someone cleared it after expiration, she said, or it was never allowed to expire in practice. Then why mark it expired? To stop questions from repeating. Mara thought about that. Not to hide the existence of a file. to hide the fact that it remained active after the language surrounding it had gone quiet. That was an administrator's solution, elegant in a tired way. Make the record appear settled, so no one asks why settlement keeps generating maintenance. Ilian opened the access history for the sunset file. Again, there was a gap, but this one was narrower. The file had been touched 12 years earlier by an office in Central Review that no longer existed under that name. Before that, 41 years. The same year as the altered handling marker in the transit bundle. He wrote the dates on the terminal margin with the stylus, then looked at Mara. No need to say what both had already seen. Same intervention window. Same phrase. Same effort to regulate order. Mara went back to the scanner table and laid the altered pages out side by side, all 7 now visible in a shallow fan. Slightly different sheen. Clean edges. Too exact for chance. She looked at them not as text, but as a set of placements. Beginning, middle, end. If the instruction matters, she said, then it matters because someone might read the section backward from the bottom. Why would they? Because last lines often summarize. Lawyers skip ahead. Clerks skim endings. Auditors look for certification language first. He gave a small nod. So the instruction is practical, which means the consequence is practical. Ilian turned that over, then said, memory contamination? She almost dismissed it, then stopped herself. Not because he was right, but because the idea arrived from procedure rather than fear. If a section depended on sequential interpretation, reading the final line first could distort how all prior lines were understood. Not through hypnosis or nonsense, through framing. She looked at the body text again. A document does not only say what it says. It arranges what can be concluded from it. Read the ending first, and the middle begins to lean toward it. Read the wrong instruction before the conditions around it and the authority of that instruction changes. In legal history, order was often the hidden engine. Which testimony came first? Which clause defined the rest? Which appendix was treated as parent and which as child? Change sequence and meaning does not disappear. It relocates. Her fingers touched the top of page 72. One core idea. It rose in her mind, not as a phrase, but as a shape. Order creates truth faster than truth creates order. She did not say it aloud. Instead, she asked, can we reconstruct the original section from external citations? Maybe pieces of it. Do that. He began cross-referencing every visible sentence against later bulletins, training extracts, arbitration notes, and customs digest fragments stored locally. Slow work, but precise. If a replacement section had been built over an original, echoes might remain in derivative records that quoted standard language by habit. Bureaucracies copied themselves with enormous loyalty. Mara stayed with the pages. At the bottom of page 78, the instruction remained almost polite. Do not read the last line first. She resisted the childish urge to do exactly that. Not from superstition, from respect for design. Whoever had built the trap, or safeguard, had assumed a type of reader. Tired, clever enough to skim, confident enough to jump ahead. The warning was not there to provoke the opposite. It was there because someone knew how trained minds save time. Time was where errors entered. I have a partial match, Ilian said. She crossed him. On the screen, a training abstract from 29 years earlier quoted a line from the same certification section. Not identical to page 78. Similar, but not the same. The public abstract read, final certification follows complete review of prior transit conditions. In the altered page on Mara's table, the sentence in that position read, final certification may precede summary review where receiving authority deems sequence sufficient. Mara exhaled slowly through her nose. There it was. Not dramatic. Worse. The section had been rewritten to permit conclusion before context. A legal permission to finalize before fully reading what came before, provided the receiving authority claimed sufficiency. The line on page 72 now mattered more. The handling gaps mattered more. The warning in the lower margin mattered most. Someone had not merely hidden information. They had formalized the ability to decide before review was complete. Ilian said, very quietly, that changes the whole bundle. Yes. And anything certified under it? Yes. He looked at the access history again. How many years? Mara did not answer. Numbers would come later, and they would be ugly in an administrative way, which was often the most durable kind. Instead, she returned to the altered pages and forced herself to continue in order. Page 72, then 73, then 74. The language tightened as it advanced. Clauses referring forward. Terms defined only after use. A document built to pull the reader along one prescribed path. She felt it now, the way the section wanted to be read. Each sentence only fully settled after the next. Read backward. Any one line might seem broader than intended. Read forward, it narrowed under later conditions. That was the design. Not concealment alone. Sequencing. By the time she reached the final page again, the lower margin instruction no longer looked strange. It looked honest in its own limited way. A last surviving restraint left by someone who had participated in the replacement but had not entirely agreed with what replacement required. Do not read the last line first. Not because of magic, because the last line, seen too early, licensed the wrong act. She read the body text down to the final paragraph. Stopped before the bottom line. Checked the cross-reference again. Checked the structure above it. Let the section define itself as far as it could, without closure. Then she read the last line. It was brief, administrative, exact, and once read in sequence, it did not authorize freedom at all. It did the opposite. It bound the whole section to a condition missing from the altered certification language copied elsewhere. Mara's hand tightened once on the page edge. Across the room, Ilian stood before she spoke. The final line? He asked. She looked at him. All certifications under this section require full antecedent review, she said. He was silent for one beat. Then another. The room did not change. The vents kept moving air. The scanner light remained white. The glass still reflected desks and shelving and two people in station black. But the altered pages on the table had become something larger than a corrupted record. They were the surviving hinge between what procedure had once required and what someone later needed it to permit. Ilian stepped closer to the table. So if a reader skips to the end first, they might think the section allows early closure, Mara said, unless they read the lines that narrow it. And someone rewrote the middle to make that misreading operational. Yes. He looked at the pages, then at the locked hatch. Whoever did this understood how people read. Mara placed the sheet down flat and aligned it with the scanner guide, not because she meant to scan it, but because her hands needed a precise task. No, she said. Whoever did this understood how institutions get tired. A thin delay line flickered once across the wall terminal, then repeated the same flicker half a second later. Ilian noticed it first, not because it was obvious, but because it was identical. He paused with his hand resting near the stylus, eyes fixed on the edge of the display where the line had appeared, just a narrow band, no wider than a fingernail, moving from left to right and vanishing as though it had corrected itself. Then it came again. Same width, same speed, same position. The system did not repeat glitches like that. Not twice, not precisely. Mara saw his stillness before she saw the line. What? He didn't answer immediately. He waited. The delay line did not return a third time. He exhaled through his nose, once controlled. Rendering fault, he said. No, no, he repeated quieter. Mara across the room, her attention shifting from the altered pages to the terminal. She stood just behind his shoulder, not leaning in, just close enough to see the logs. Replay the last 30 seconds, she said. Ilian pulled up the display buffer. The system retained a visual memory for diagnostic use, usually ignored because it added little to normal work. He scrubbed backward. The flicker appeared. Then again. Same timing. Not random, Mara said. No. External. Unlikely. Air-gapped. She looked at the relay map again. No new routes had opened. No unauthorized handshakes. The annex was still isolated. Then internal. He nodded. They both understood what that meant, and neither of them said it. Mara stepped back to the scanner table. The altered pages remained where she had left them, fanned slightly under the softened light. The cream note sheet was still tucked beneath the scanner base, its edge visible, the written line hidden unless someone lifted the machine. She did not touch it. Instead, she moved to page 72 again, not to read it, but to check alignment. She placed it against the scanner guide, watching the calibration strip. The strip aligned perfectly. No overshoot. No correction. It behaved as it should. Mara let her hand hover for a second longer than necessary, then withdrew it. Behind her, Ilian closed the visual buffer and switched the terminal to raw text output. The interface stripped away smoothing, color gradients, and display interpolation. What remained was plain signal, lines of data, timestamps, routing confirmations. Run a timing trace on the display process, he said. Mara didn't ask why. He was not looking for the flicker itself. He was looking for what caused it to repeat. The system responded. No anomalies. Expected. Check micro-latency, she said. He adjusted the query. The response took longer than it should have. Both of them noticed that. The delay resolved, and a set of values appeared. Clean, within tolerance. Nothing that explained duplication. Run it again, Mara said. He did. This time the delay was shorter. Values identical. Mara moved to the wall beside the terminal and rested her fingers lightly against the metal surface. The station's systems were layered. What they saw at the terminal was only the last stage of chain that began deeper, closer to the physical hardware. If something had repeated at the display level, it had either originated there, which the logs denied, or it had been introduced upstream and passed through unchanged. Pull the input buffer, she said. Ilian hesitated for half a second. That's not part of normal review. Neither is duplicated output. He keyed the request. The system resisted longer this time. Mara watched the timer climb. Not fast enough to be obvious. Not slow enough to ignore. A careful delay, as if something upstream was deciding how much friction to apply. Then the buffer opened. Raw input frames, unprocessed. Mara scanned the last minute. There, 2 identical frames. Same timestamp, down to the smallest unit the system recorded. That shouldn't be possible, Ilian said. No, clocks don't duplicate, unless something writes twice. He looked at the frames again. Or something reads twice and records both. Mara turned back toward the scanner table. The altered pages lay still. The instruction in the lower margin remained unseen from where she stood, but she felt its presence as a kind of quiet pressure in the room. Order matters, not just in reading, in recording, in interpretation. If the system could duplicate a frame without marking it as duplication, then sequence could be altered without visible trace. One event becomes 2, or 2 becomes 1, or a sequence shifts just enough that cause and effect change places. She picked up page 74, ran her thumb across the margin, set it down again. Ilian, she said, what happens if the system records 2 identical frames and treats them as separate events? He didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. It shifts sequence weight, he said finally. Ow! If a decision depends on order, and 2 events appear where one existed, the system can resolve ambiguity by assuming redundancy, which lets it choose either yes, or prioritize one over the other. Yes. Mara nodded once. Like reading the last line first, she said. Ilian glanced at her. She didn't elaborate. He didn't ask. Instead, he pulled up the Annex's event log for the last hour. Every action, every input, every confirmation. He scanned for duplication. Nothing obvious. But obvious was not what they were dealing with. Filter by identical timestamps, Mara said. He applied the filter. 3 results appeared. Not just a display flicker. 2 earlier entries. One from the scanner initialization. One from a relay path trace when they had first encountered the delay. Each pair identical. Each pair recorded as separate events. Mara felt the shape of it now. Not random. Not a fault. A behavior. Small. Controlled. Enough to be dismissed as noise unless someone was already looking for something else. She moved back to the scanner. The calibration strip. The overshoot. 0.5 millimeter. Corrected immediately. 1 mistake. Then perfection. Too neat. She placed her hand flat on the scanner bed, not touching the pages. Run the scanner again, she said. On what? Blank. He hesitated, then nodded. Mara, clear the bed. No paper. No input. Just the machine. Ilian triggered the scan. The strip aligned. Paused. Held. The light passed over empty glass. The system recorded the event. Mara watched the calibration strip closely. It did not overshoot. It did not correct. It behaved perfectly. She waited. Nothing. Ilian checked the log. Single entry. No duplication. Again, Mara said. He ran it. Same result. Clean. No duplication. Mara stepped back. The pattern was selective. Not constant. Not random. Triggered. But by what? She turned slowly toward the altered pages. 7 sheets. Different stock. Rewritten sequence. Instruction controlling order. Handling records erased. Certification language altered. And now, system duplication events. Small enough to ignore. Precise enough to matter. She picked up page 72 again. Placed it on the scanner. Run it, she said. Ilian did. The strip aligned. Paused. Moved. 0.5 millimeter past the guide. Then corrected. Mara didn't move. The scan completed. Ilian checked the log. 2 entries. Identical timestamps. He didn't speak. Mara removed the page. Set it aside. Placed page 73. Run it. The scan executed. No overshoot. Single entry. She continued. Page 74. Clean. Page 75. Clean. Page 76. The strip aligned. Paused. Shifted. Less this time. Barely visible. Then corrected. The scan completed. 2 entries. Mara exhaled slowly. Not every page. Selective. Specific. She moved to page 78. The final page. The one with the instruction. She held it for a moment longer than the others. Not reading. Just feeling the paper. Then placed it on the scanner. Run it. Ilian triggered the scan. The strip aligned. Paused. Did not move. The light passed. The scan completed. Single entry. Mara stared at the log. Then at the page. Then at the note sheet still hidden beneath the scanner base. The pattern formed, but not fully. Not the last page, Ilian said. No. Then why? Mara didn't answer. She was already moving. She pulled the cream note sheet from under the scanner. Unfolded it. The written line at the top stared back at her. Do not read the last line first. She placed the note sheet on the scanner. Run it. Ilian hesitated. Do it. He did. The strip aligned. Paused. Shifted. A fraction. Then corrected. The scan completed. 2 entries. Mara closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not long enough to be called rest. Just enough to settle the shape of the thought. Then she opened them. It's not the document, she said. Ilian looked at her. It's the sequence, she continued. He didn't interrupt. She placed the note sheet beside page 78. Align them. Certain lines, she said. Certain instructions. When processed out of order, they trigger duplication. Why? To compensate. For what? She looked at the terminal. Then at the altered pages. Then back at him. For a missing step. He absorbed that. Then, so the system tries to correct sequence? Yes. By duplicating events. Or by reinforcing them. He nodded slowly. In the overshoot, Mara glanced at the calibration strip. A physical echo. He considered that. Then said, this isn't just in the document. No, it's in the system. Yes. Silence settled between them again. Not empty. Waited. Mara folded the note sheet once more. Carefully. Placed it back under the scanner. Not hidden. Not exposed. Just positioned. Ilian returned to the terminal. Pulled up the annex's deeper system layers. Permissions he technically had. Access he rarely used. He paused before executing the next command. Not out of hesitation. Out of precision. If this is sequence correction, he said, then it has a reference. Mara didn't move. Something it compares against, he continued. A baseline order. Yes. And if that baseline is wrong, then everything after it adjusts to the wrong shape. He looked at her. Where's the baseline? Mara's gaze drifted to the altered pages. Then beyond them. To the shelves. The seal drawers. The rows of records stretching into the dim. Not here, she said. Then where? She took a breath. Controlled. Measured. Where the first sequence was accepted, she said. Ilian understood. Not immediately, but enough. Central records. Yes. He looked at the locked hatch, then back at the terminal. If this is active, it's been active for decades. He nodded once. No reaction beyond that. Just acceptance. Then action. He began isolating the annex further, cutting non-essential links, reducing the system footprint, making the room smaller, more contained. Mara returned to the scanner, placed her hand lightly on the edge, felt the faint vibration of the machine at rest. Steady, controlled, as it should be, but now, not trusted. She looked at page 78 one last time, at the lower margin, at the line that had survived everything else. Do not read the last line first. She didn't touch it, didn't move it, just observed, then stepped back. The room held its quiet, but it was no longer the same quiet. The air vent above the shelving unit gave a short, uneven hum, then settled into its usual rhythm as if nothing had interrupted it. Mara noticed the gap in the sound more than the sound itself. It lasted less than a second, but the return felt placed. She didn't look up immediately. Instead, she shifted one of the altered pages a few millimeters to the right, aligning its edge with the seam in the scanner bed. The seam was straight. It had always been straight, but now she checked it anyway. Ilian had paused at the terminal. Not frozen, not uncertain. Paused in the way someone does when they sense the system is about to respond before they've finished asking. The display updated without input. One line. No header. No routing marker. No timestamp. Just text. Sequence integrity maintained. Ilian didn't touch the console. Mara turned slowly. Did you request that? She asked. No. The line remained for 2 seconds, then disappeared. The terminal returned to its previous state as if nothing had interrupted it. Ilian moved his hand to the stylus, but did not pick it up. System message, he said. No. Mara replied. No. Systems log. They don't reassure. He considered that, then said, then what was it? Mara didn't answer, because she didn't know, and because naming it too quickly would force it into a category it might not belong to. Instead, she walked to the terminal and pulled up the system log. No entry. She checked the buffer. Nothing. No trace of the line. Ilian stepped aside slightly to give her full access. Not recorded, he said, which means it wasn't meant to be. He watched her hands move across the interface. You think it's part of the same mechanism? Yes. Sequence correction. Or enforcement. He didn't respond to that. Mara stepped back from the terminal and looked at the room as a whole. Not the objects. The arrangement. The scanner, the desk, the shelves, the glass partition. The placement of things. Everything in Annex Theta had been positioned for function. Nothing was decorative. Nothing was accidental. And yet, sequence. Not just in reading. Not just in data. In space. She walked to the shelving unit and stopped in front of drawer 14A. Ilian noticed immediately. That one, he said. She didn't ask how he knew. He had mentioned it on his first day. It closed slower than the others. Half a second. She placed her fingers on the handle. Didn't pull. Just felt the weight of it. Then she opened it. The drawer slid out smoothly. Inside, rows of sealed document sleeves. Each labeled. Each aligned. Each part of a larger order. Mara scanned the labels quickly. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. She pushed the drawer closed. It stopped. A fraction before full closure. Then settled. That half-second delay. Ilian crossed the room. You think it's connected? I think it's consistent. With what? She looked at the drawer. Then at the scanner. Then at the terminal. Small deviations, she said. Corrected immediately. He nodded. Like the calibration strip. Yes. Like the duplicated frames. Yes. Like the delay line. Yes. He stepped back slightly. Then the system doesn't tolerate deviation. It tolerates it, Mara said. Just long enough to correct it. And record it. Sometimes. He looked at the terminal again. Or hide it. Mara didn't respond. Because that was closer. Closer than she wanted. She returned to the scanner table. The altered pages remained where she had left them. Unchanged. But now, they felt less like documents. More like instructions. Not explicit. Not direct. But embedded. She picked up page 72 again. Held it at eye level. Not reading the text. Watching the structure. The spacing. the alignment of paragraphs. Then she flipped it over. The back was blank, clean, unremarkable, except she tilted it slightly. The light caught the surface differently. There, a faint impression, not ink, pressure, as if something had been written on a sheet above it. She moved it under the desk lamp. The impression became clearer, not readable, not fully, but enough to see that it existed. "Ilian," she said quietly. He came over. She handed him the page. He angled it under the light. "Saw it. Imprint," he said. "Yes. From original page. Before replacement." He nodded. "Can we recover it?" "Partially." She moved to the terminal. "Open a surface scan tool. Not standard use. But the annex had tools for dealing with damaged records. This wasn't damage, but the principle applied." She placed the page back on the scanner. Adjusted the settings. Increased depth. Changed angle sensitivity. "Run it," she said. Ilian did. The scan took longer this time. Processing more data. Looking for variations in pressure rather than ink. The image appeared slowly. Faint lines. Fragments. Not enough to read directly, but enough to suggest structure. Mara leaned closer. Adjusted contrast. Filtered noise. The fragments sharpened. Letters began to form. Incomplete. Broken. But present. She didn't try to read it as text. Not yet. Instead, she mapped the positions. Where lines started. Where they ended. Compared them to the visible text on the front. They didn't match. Different structure. Different spacing. Different sequence. "This is the original," she said. Ilian watched the screen. "Before alteration." "Yes." He looked at the fragments. "Can you reconstruct it?" "Not fully, but enough." She didn't answer immediately, because enough depended on what they were trying to prove, or understand, or undo. She adjusted the filters again, focused on one section, a line near the bottom, not the final line. Above it, the fragments became clearer, not perfect, but readable. Mara read it silently. Then again, Ilian waited. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "The original doesn't allow early certification," she said. He nodded. Expected. She zoomed in further. Another line. Higher up. More fragmented. She reconstructed it piece by piece. "Sequence must follow recorded transit order," she said. Ilian exhaled slowly. "That's the baseline." "Yes." She leaned back slightly, looked at the altered page on the table, then at the reconstructed fragments on the screen. Two versions of the same section. One enforcing order, one allowing deviation. And the system, adjusting, correcting, duplicating, maintaining something. But what? "Sequence integrity maintained," Ilian said quietly. Mara looked at him. That message, he continued. It wasn't reassurance. No, it was a statement. Yes. He turned back to the terminal. If the system is maintaining sequence integrity, then it has a definition of sequence, and it's enforcing it against deviations. He nodded. Even if the visible document says otherwise. Yes. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't just tension. It was alignment. Two lines of thought meeting. Not perfectly, but enough. Ilian moved to the terminal, began tracing deeper, beyond the annex, into the station's core systems. Permissions escalated. Access widened. He didn't ask, didn't announce, just worked. Mara watched him for a moment, then returned to the scanner. Placed page 78 on the bed. Didn't scan it, just positioned it, aligned it, perfectly. Then, she rotated it, 180 degrees, upside down. The calibration strip adjusted, aligned, paused, did not move. She didn't run the scan. She just observed. Then she rotated the page back, aligned it again. The strip behaved the same. No deviation, no correction. She stepped back. Orientation doesn't matter, she said. Ilian glanced over. But sequence does. Yes. He returned to his work. The terminal now displayed deeper system layers. Not user-facing. Not documented. Raw structures. Data flows. Mara couldn't read all of it, but she didn't need to. She watched his posture. The slight tension in his shoulders. The way his movements became more precise. Slower. He was close to something. Found it, he said. Mara across the room. On the screen, a core process. Buried. Unnamed. No documentation. but active, continuously. It monitored input sequences, compared them, adjusted outputs, subtly, silently. Sequence correction engine, Ilian said. Not named, Mara replied. Doesn't need to be. She studied it. The logic was complex, layered, but the purpose was clear. Maintain a consistent sequence, even if inputs varied, even if records changed, even if documents were altered. Mara felt the shape of it settle. Not a bug, not an accident, a safeguard, or a control. Who built this? Ilian asked. Mara didn't answer, because the question was wrong. Not who, when, and why. She looked at the altered pages again, then at the reconstructed original, then at the system process. 3 layers. Document, alteration, correction. All of this, she said quietly, is trying to keep something in order. Ilian nodded. But the order isn't visible. No, only enforced. Yes. He leaned back slightly, just enough to create space between himself and the screen. If we change the sequence, he said, what happens? Mara looked at him, not immediately answering, because the answer mattered, and because once done, it couldn't be undone. Then we find out what it's protecting, she said. Silence. The room held it, not resisting, not reacting, just waiting. A thin sheet of dust near the base of the scanner lifted slightly, then settled back in the same place, as if the air had moved and reconsidered. Mara watched it without reacting. No vent change, no pressure shift, just a small disturbance that corrected itself. She didn't comment on it. Not yet. Across the room, Ilian stood with one hand resting lightly on the edge of the terminal. He wasn't touching the interface, just anchoring himself there, as if the distance between him and the system mattered now. What sequence? He asked. Mara didn't look at him immediately. She turned page 78 over once more, not to read it, to confirm its weight, then placed it back down. Not random, she said. No, not arbitrary either. He nodded. So, it has a reference. Yes. She moved to the note sheet, pulled it from beneath the scanner again, unfolded it, placed it beside the altered pages. Sequence isn't just order, she said. It's expectation. Ilian didn't interrupt. It's what the system believes should come next. And if something doesn't match, it adjusts or duplicates. Yes, he considered that. Then we don't change the document, he said. Mara looked at him. We change the expectation. A brief pause. Then she nodded. Exactly. The room felt smaller now. Not physically, structurally, as if the boundaries of what mattered had tightened. Mara gathered the 7 altered pages, stacked them carefully, aligned their edges perfectly. Then she separated them again, not in original order. She placed page 78 first, then 72, then 75, then 73, then 76, then 74, then 77. Not random, but not original. Ilian watched her hands, didn't ask for the logic, trusted that there was one. Why this order? He asked anyway. Mara adjusted the alignment of the top page by a fraction. Because it breaks expectation, she said. Ow! It interrupts forward dependency. He nodded slowly. Each page expects the previous one. Yes. So this forces the system to reconcile conflicting sequences. Yes. He looked at the terminal, then back at the pages, and we watch how it reacts. Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. She placed the stack on the scanner. Didn't run it yet. Just let it sit there. The calibration strip remained still, waiting. Ilian moved to the terminal, opened the sequence correction process, prepared to monitor it, not interfere, just observe. Ready, he said. Mara nodded, then pressed the scan. The strip aligned, paused, held, then moved. Not a clean shift, not a precise correction, a hesitation, a micro-adjustment, then another. The light passed. The scan completed. Ilian watched the log. 3 entries. Not 2. Not identical. Similar, but not identical. Different, he said. Mara stepped closer. The timestamps were close, but not exact. The system was struggling to reconcile, not duplicating cleanly, not correcting cleanly, adapting. Again, she said. He ran the next scan. The strip moved earlier this time. before full alignment. Then corrected. The scan completed. For entries, Mara felt it now. Not just a pattern, a response. The system was no longer maintaining silently. It was compensating. Visible. Observable. Ilian leaned slightly toward the screen. The correction engine is active, he said. I know. It's reallocating sequence weight. Mara nodded. Keep going. She didn't stop. Page after page. Out of order. Each scan increasing deviation. Each log, entry more fragmented. More complex. The system was working harder. Adjusting more. The room remained quiet. But the terminal was no longer still. Lines updating faster. Processes shifting. Paths recalculating. Mara placed the final page. Page 77. Not the original last, but the last in her sequence. She paused, just for a moment, then scanned it. The strip aligned, then didn't. It hovered, not misaligned, not corrected, just uncertain. Then it moved, not forward, not back, sideways, barely. Then the scan completed. Ilian stared at the log. 5 entries, all different, all close, none identical. He didn't speak. Mara stepped back. The stack of pages was complete, but the sequence, broken, deliberately. She turned to the terminal. The correction process was no longer quiet. It was active, visible, adjusting continuously. Try to resolve something that no longer resolved cleanly. Now, she said. Ilian didn't ask. He knew. He opened the deeper layer. The baseline reference. The hidden sequence. The one the system was enforcing. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't documented. But it was there. A structure. A pattern. An expected order of events. He pulled it into view. Mara leaned closer. The structure unfolded. Not as text. Not as pages. As relationships. Dependencies. Order chains. And within it, the altered section. Mapped. Connected. But not original. Not baseline. The system had accepted the altered version. Integrated it. Built around it. But not perfectly. Fragments of the original remained. Conflicting. Embedded. Like two sequences occupying the same space. Mara pointed. There. Ilian followed. A node. Small. But central. The final line. Not the altered one. The original. Still present. Still referenced. Still enforced. Despite everything. Why didn't it get replaced? He asked. Mara didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was emerging. Not from the system. From the design. It's the anchor, she said. What do you mean? The sequence depends on it. He looked again. The entire structure. Every dependency. Every correction. Led back to that line. All certifications under this section require full antecedent review. He read it silently. Then again. If this changes, he said, the whole sequence collapses. Yes. Then why alter the rest? To hide it. He looked at her. Not remove it, she continued. Just bury it. In sequence. Yes. So that only those who read properly, in order, would find it. And those who didn't, would miss it. And the system would quietly correct, maintain, enforce, without explanation. Ilian leaned back slightly. Not far. Just enough to think. This wasn't sabotage, he said. No. It was containment. Yes. Someone knew the system would preserve the anchor. Mara nodded. And used that. To allow deviation without collapse. Yes. Silence. Not empty. Full. Understanding settling into place. Mara looked at the altered pages again. Then at the system. Then at Ilian. They didn't remove the truth, she said. They change how people reach it. He nodded. And the system makes sure it's still there. For those who follow sequence. Yes. And invisible to those who don't. Yes. The room felt different now. Not tense. Not uncertain. Clear. In a quiet, precise way. Ilian looked at the terminal. Then at Mara. What do we do? She didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't action. Not yet. It was recognition. She walked back to the scanner. Gathered the pages. Placed them back in original order. Carefully. One by one. Aligned them. Perfectly. Then she took the note sheet. Unfolded it. Looked at the written line. Then, without speaking, she placed it on top of the stack. Not hidden. Not emphasized. Just there. Ilian watched. Didn't move. Didn't interrupt. Mara stepped back. The pages were still. The system continued its quiet adjustments. The room returned to its controlled state. Almost unchanged, but not the same. She looked at the terminal one last time, then turned away. The glass partition caught the edge of the overhead light and held it a moment too long before letting it fade. Mara noticed the delay in the reflection, not in the light itself. She stood still, watching the surface settle back into its usual dull sheen. The room looked the same again, shelves, desk, scanner, terminal, but she had begun to distrust how quickly things returned to normal. Across the room, Ilian powered down the deeper access layers one by one. No abrupt shutdown, no full disconnect, just a careful unwinding. He restored the system to standard review mode in the same order it had been altered, reversing each step with the same precision he had used to take it apart. When he reached the final layer, he paused for a fraction longer than before, then closed it. The terminal returned to its familiar interface. Calm, contained, unremarkable. Mara didn't ask what remained beneath it. She already knew. The sequence correction engine hadn't been removed. It hadn't been altered. It had simply been observed and left where it was. She turned back to the scanner table. The pages were stacked in their original order. Page 72 through 78. The note sheet resting on top. Nothing hidden, nothing emphasized, just aligned. She adjusted the stack slightly, a millimeter to the left, then stopped. No reason to perfect it further. Ilian stepped away from the terminal. The distance between him and the system seemed deliberate now. Measured. What happens next? He asked. Mara didn't answer immediately. She walked to the shelving unit again. Open drawer 14A. The delay was still there. Half a second. Then closure. She left it open this time. Just slightly. Not enough to draw attention. Enough to remain uncorrected. She returned to the center of the room. The system will keep doing what it's doing, she said. Maintaining sequence. Yes. Even if the documents don't. Yes. He considered that. Then nothing changes. Mara looked at him. Everything changes, she said quietly. He didn't argue, because he understood the distinction. Not visible, not immediate, but real. She walked back to the scanner, picked up the stack of pages, held them for a moment, then placed them into a new document sleeve. Sealed it. Not tightly, just enough. The seal aligned with the edge. Precise. Routine. She wrote the classification tag. Not a warning. Not an alert. Just a standard review marker. Then placed the sleeve into the intake tray. Ilian watched the process. Every step. Uninterrupted. You're not flagging it, he said. No. Why? Mara didn't look up. Because it's already known, she said. He frowned slightly. By who? She sealed the sleeve fully. Pressed the edge. Ensured contact. Then set it down. The system, she said. He was silent for a moment. Then, that's not oversight. No. It's preservation. Yes. He stepped closer. Then what's our role? Mara finally looked at him. Not directly. Just enough. To not break it, she said. He held her gaze for a second. Then nodded. Not agreement. Recognition. He turned back to the terminal. Opened the standard report interface. Began entering the review summary. No mention of altered sequence. No mention of system behavior. Just document reviewed. Structural variance noted. No action required. He paused, then added one line. Sequence integrity preserved. Mara watched him type it. Didn't comment. Didn't correct. He submitted the report. The system accepted it immediately. No delay. No duplication. Clean. He closed the interface. Stepped back. The room settled. The vents hummed steadily. The scanner remained idle. The glass reflected less than before. Mara walked to the light panel. Adjusted it by 1 degree. Barely noticeable, but enough to shift the reflection slightly. Then she turned it back. Restored it. Ilian watched the motion. Didn't ask. Didn't need to. They both stood in the room. Not speaking. Not moving. Just present. The altered pages were now part of the system again. Reabsorbed. Reclassified. Their disruption contained. Not erased. Not exposed. Integrated. Mara moved to the desk. Saturday. Pulled a fresh sheet of paper. Not the cream one. Standard stock. She wrote nothing on it. Just placed it there. Aligned with the edge. Her hand rested beside it. Still, Ilian remained standing, near the terminal, not touching it, not watching it, just aware of it. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It held weight, not tension, not relief, something quieter, understanding. After a while, Mara reached for the drawer. Not 14A, a different one. She opened it, removed a small clip, placed it on the desk, aligned it with the paper, then adjusted it slightly. Not perfect, just close. She left it there, uncorrected. Ilian noticed. Of course he did. He didn't move to fix it, didn't comment, just observed. The room allowed it, didn't react, didn't correct. Not immediately. Mara leaned back slightly. Her eyes moved once across the room. The scanner, the shelves, the terminal, the glass, each in its place, each part of a larger order. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just accepted. Ilian turned toward the hatch, paused, then disengaged the lock. The inner door opened with a soft shift in pressure. The outer door followed. The corridor beyond looked the same as it had before. Quiet, neutral, unaware. He stepped aside. Mara stood, picked up nothing, left the paper, the clip, the drawer slightly open, the pages sealed, all in place. She walked to the hatch, passed through. Ilian followed. The doors closed behind them. The annex remained, unchanged, or close enough. Inside, the air moved. The light held. The scanner waited. The system continued, maintaining, adjusting, preserving. The clip on the desk remained slightly misaligned. Not corrected. Not yet. Just there.